Good morning, everyone. Well, I would assume it's good morning if most of our participants are from South Africa. Now, there's a couple joining in other parts of the world. It's either going to be incredibly late or incredibly early. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us for the session today on PoPIA Unpacked. And today we're going to take a look at effective and compliant content management. We currently have a good amount of attendees on the call, and I'm assuming a couple more will join, but we will kick off the presentation in the essence of time. So I would like to introduce you to the speakers today. Of course, a lot of you know me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Malan. I'm the Regional Sales Director for DocuWare in English-speaking Africa and the Middle East. I basically assist our customers and our business partners in engagement around the DocuWare product. Of course, today very focused around compliancy and how to manage our documents on a compliant way. I'm joined today by Jemima Ashton-Allen. She is the COO of BusinessGenetics. Some information on the screen, and you can obviously see her on the video. And today's agenda, Jemima will cover with us PoPIA compliance in general. So we're going to talk about PoPIA compliance, what you should expect, what you should consider, what you should have considered already pre-1 July 2021, and how you can effectively manage your content and what you should consider afterwards. After a discussion, which will take approximately 20 minutes, we'll try to stick within the timelines. For those of you that is watching me on your stopwatch, I've already stolen 2 minutes from Jemima, so she'll go a little bit longer. I will do a live demo of DocuWare. So we'll take a look at some examples about how we can effectively manage our content within the DocuWare environment. Of course, just examples, and we can discuss a little bit more. After that, we will open up to a Q&A so we can field some questions. I also just want to mention to those of you who have questions, please do not hesitate to post them in the questions section of your control bar on the right-hand side. You'll see there's a questions box. Pop your questions in there. We will field them after the live demo. If we don't have enough time, or potentially we cannot answer your question because of the technical nature of the question, we will, of course, come back to you on all of those questions and answers, and we will answer some of those questions during the session. So please don't hesitate to ask some questions. Thank you very much. Jemima, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Darby, and good morning to everybody. Thank you to our partners, DocuWare, for inviting us to participate as a panelist on this discussion, which is very topical given that we are literally on the eve of compliance in South Africa to the PoPIA Act. Darby has mentioned a little bit about myself, but as he said, I'm the CEO of a company called BusinessGenetics. And we are an advisory and innovation firm who, over the last few years, have done a lot of work in the regulatory space, not only PoPIA, but other sorts of compliance as well. But our PoPIA journey has been an interesting one, in that we have worked with large organizations, with mid-sized organizations, with NGOs, all of whom have different permutations and different nuances to how they want to comply to the Act. One disclaimer right up front, we are not lawyers or legal advisors. We provide advisory based on best practice, by what we've seen, by our understanding of the regulatory environment, and we always defer to our clients' legal partners when we want legal opinion, because that's what they're best placed to do. So just some really interesting statistics that have come out in the last few months that really should have South African organizations quivering in their boots, I believe. In the year 2020, we have recorded in South Africa 577 malware attacks per hour on businesses in the country. And that's a year-on-year increase of 22% over 2019. It's obviously related to more people being online, to retailers having to switch to online mechanisms, to banking applications needing to move swiftly to online mechanisms, but certainly quite a sort of show-stopping statistic there. Also, quite heart-stopping is that in 2020, South Africa had the third highest number of, we were third highest cybercrime victims of any country on the planet. And given that our population is only 25th largest, that's also quite concerning. Africa as a continent had the highest exposure score of any other continent, and the fraud via mobile banking apps doubled in a year last year, which resulted in 2.2 billion rand in losses to businesses. And that's, ransomware attacks, people having to pay to get their information back, the cost of rectifying situations and the cost of having to placate customers. That is what has happened in the last year. The other sort of scary statistic is that between 2016 and 2020, there was a huge increase, and I mean a huge spike on the curve of mentions about South Africa on the dark web. So that is, people who are discussing South Africa as a possible vulnerable place to be attacked from a cyber perspective. We know why this is happening. To a large degree, we've got single entities providing us with a lot of our infrastructure and resources, so it makes us very vulnerable to cyber attacks. Typically, there's been fairly low investment in cybersecurity in the country, and up until probably last week, we've had a very immature regulatory environment in this space. So it has made us more vulnerable. It has made attacks on us more prevalent in the last 12 months. The other thing that we find that organizations, other than perhaps the banking sector, are not sharing enough of best practice. That we're not sharing our experiences, we're not learning from each other, we're not adopting codes of conduct in particular industry sectors. People tend to, sort of bunker down and when they've had a particular attack, and don't sort of talk about it. And that's something that we really, I think, as a business community in South Africa, as we start to understand the importance of data, the importance of information, and protecting it in our organizations, not only our customers' information, but our internal information as well. I think conversations need to be had and dialogues need to be opened for us to be able to learn from one another. And I think that's going to be something very important as we walk this journey to compliance together. How do we combat this? As I said, we need to make better use of security and threat intelligence amongst ourselves. We need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves more adequately against internal threats and people-based attacks. So that's not only on the dark web and in cyberspace, but I'll talk a little more about this shortly. How are we inside our organizations making sure that a disgruntled employee or somebody with malicious intent is not doing something that they shouldn't be doing behind our proverbial backs? And the other thing is that we should be focusing more on compliance and seeing compliance as opportunity rather than a grudge, something that has to be done because it's law. So that's really sort of what we've been talking to our clients about, is how do you turn compliance to things like PoPIA and the new Cyber Crimes Act into an opportunity for improvement, into an opportunity for competitive advantage. How do we get more serious about protecting our businesses and our customers against cybercrime? And how do we start to see data and information protection as just good corporate citizenship? Because that's really what it should be. As I said earlier, we're on the eve of compliance, with being the 29th today. Tomorrow is D-Day for us in South Africa. And I'm hoping that most people on this call will have sort of applied their minds and will have base compliance come midnight tomorrow night. And then I think, we all realize that while we have a hard cutoff from a regulatory perspective, we need to start thinking about what that roadmap is for additional measures to be implemented post 1 July. And really, we are now working really, really closely with our clients to say, again, how do we take this forward? How does it start to become embedded in our clients' culture, in their way of work? and in their attitude towards data and information. We can move on. Thanks. So I'm hoping that the people on this call will have had a project plan and a project team in place over the last few months. You possibly may have looked at the secondment of external and specialist resources, whether they're legal advisors, whether they are consultants, whether they are technology partners that you've engaged with, so that together you can start to look at embedding PoPIA in your organization in the most effective and most cost-effective way as well. I'm also hoping that you will have looked at this from a risk-based perspective. So looking at your most vulnerable data and your most vulnerable areas of personal information first, and planning your activities and planning your mitigation against those risk factors. And it's always going to be, it's going to be different based on, the industry that you're in, the business side, your personal information exposure, etc. Some of us have far less exposure than others, and we've seen that. And some of us have different exposure, and I'll explain that a little later on as well. You've probably, I would imagine, put in a lot of, manual workarounds for the moment. That's what we've seen certainly in our client environments. You've probably made additions to existing forms so that people can consent or people have access to your policies and procedures. You've possibly made additions to your existing processes so that they are compliant for the moment. And I'm sure that you've had engagement with your internal and external stakeholders so that come tomorrow, they have a pretty good idea about what information that you have about them. They know how they can access that information via your various customer interaction points, for example, or internal interaction points. And they also know how long you're going to have their data for, and should they wish, how they can approach you to have their data taken off a particular database that you may have. So these are certainly, I'm also hoping that these are some of the work package areas that you have taken into consideration as you've gone through this journey, possibly in the last 12, 24 months with your planning and your projects and your stakeholders in place. So I'm hoping that you started to think about the formation of a data governance office and how that is made up. I'll show you some samples of some of the ones we've put forward later on. But that is to have a data governance officer in place to think about, roles like data analysts, data architects, data custodians in your various functional business areas, and how you bring that together possibly as a data council, and how you make decisions around data, again, for competitive advantage moving forward. And how potentially that data governance strategy is the foundation of that possibly needs to be in the principles of privacy by design. And I'm hoping that the policy you've got your policies implemented in line with that type of thinking and the type of risk-based approach that you've taken. I'm hoping that you have looked at, probably in our most cases, our most vulnerable data is our customer data and what you're doing about that. I'm hoping that you've looked at your vendor data as well, your supplier data, where it pertains to having personal information. So, for example, where you may have directors' information, where you may have suretyship as part of a vendor agreement, for example, making sure that that data is secure, and whether you're able to do risk assessments on your vendors as well, which is going to become increasingly important moving forward. I'm sure most of you have looked at employee data and how you manage that. Possibly of those three cohorts, it's the easier one to manage, but that your HR systems are in place, that you understand how long you're keeping your employee data for and why you are keeping it for that length of time. You've probably matched it against other legislation like SARS, SARS legislation, the Employee Act, that kind of thing. So hopefully you've done that homework as well. Interestingly, in the NGO space, one of the other cohorts that we needed to look at, and you may do as well if you've got if you do have donor environments, is your donor data, because that's highly vulnerable data, and how you're managing that in your environment. Moving on then to, for example, special personal information like child data. If you've got learner environments where you have people that are under 18, or learner data where you have internships where people may not be part of your employee cohort, but you still have personal information on your learner data, and how are you managing that? If we move on, and I've spoken about this, about you may have made additions to forms. Are you sure that you've got all the consent that you need, not only to market to your customer, but to house your customer's information for a particular period of time as well? Have you taken care of that? And have you looked at rights management in your organization? Swiftly moving on, have you classified your data? I've spoken about retention, very importantly, and we found this to be a really crucial topic with a lot of our clients. Can you either delete or at least de-identify your data if somebody requests to do so? And that's not only in your front-end customer-facing systems, but can you de-identify in, for example, your data warehouses or your data lakes as well? So throughout the life cycle of you having that customer data, do you have a mechanism to truly de-identify that customer? I know in some ERP environments we've had some challenges, certainly in our client environments, and the challenge of then de-identifying the wrong information. It's quite a tricky subject to work around. Really importantly, bottom left-hand corner there is that cross-border data transfer. How are you dealing, or how have you dealt, hopefully, with your cloud information, your cloud health data, particularly if your cloud is based in a non-GDPR, for example, country? How are you dealing with the flow of data between yourselves and satellite offices abroad, etc. Very important, this next block, and we find that people are not paying enough attention to this. Training and culture change about data. How is your organization seeing data not as a siloed transactional data source, but how are you seeing it as an enterprise-wide view, and how are you seeing it as a resource to be used and harnessed as part of your strategy and your innovation ideas moving forward? And that goes back right to the beginning to say, how is your data governance office managing that on your behalf? Two things that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on, because we've had very interesting conversations around this, are your security and risk management, both your manual and automated, because we are very good at the automated stuff, not so good at managing risk around manual information, special personal information, etc. And then data modeling and process mapping. Are you just putting Visio maps into place because it ticks the box for the regulator, or are you harnessing that data again to be meaningful in your environment moving forward? We can move on, Dolly. So these are the interesting conversations we have had with our clients, and I'm hoping that you have had them with your project teams and your internal teams as well. Do you know where your personal information data is? Are you 100% sure that you know where those data sources are? Can you find that personal information quickly? Because we have found in some of the data breaches that we have seen in our client organizations, that has been a difficulty, is identifying that data quickly. And can you detect internal breaches rapidly? Those are the conversations we're having. Can you, that disgruntled employee that I spoke about earlier, who may be downloading your customer data because he's got an uncle who has an insurance business and is going to pay him for the lead, can you detect that is happening in your organization? Really interesting conversations that we're having at the moment. In the security space, we know that firewalls aren't enough. People are saying, yeah, we've got a firewall. The firewall is your fence. We're looking here for that 10-foot wall with the spikes on top that are going to protect your data for the long term and in a very definite way. What levels of encryption are you looking at? Are you encrypting at server level, databases, file level? What do you need to based on your particular organization? As I said, can you in an automated way quickly locate your data? And what are you doing about that internal risk management? Silly things like if you've had books and books and books with people signing in to come into your organization, that's got personal information in it. Where are those stored? Where are those housed? Can somebody just walk off site with 3 of those and again sell them to their auntie who's got a call center or what have you, as a credible source of customer information? There's phone numbers on there, there's ID numbers on there in some instances. What are you doing about that? Then I spoke about the data modeling and the process modeling. We have found that too many people have seen this, as I said, it's just an exercise to very quickly document their processes, tick the regulatory box, and put it into file 13. When so much more can be done with that information. Certainly in our business, we have our own IP and approach to this, and we've really encouraged clients to see this again as an opportunity. The way we approach it, it's very low touch on business. We gather information very quickly. We look at process in a 5-dimensional view. So we look at it in terms of what activity is being done by who, with which data in and out, which is very important in the regulatory environment. Where is all of this taking place, and when is it taking place? Is there a temporal component to it? In that, because of the way we have done that in our engagement with customers, we're able to give them a real system integration view. So we're able to show them how data, particularly personal information data, is being transferred between systems. So remember I said to you right in the beginning, that whole cradle to grave life cycle of personal information, we're able to show clients that in the view that we give them. In our which model, which is our data model, we attach the entities and attributes so we can see not only where the information is, what system it's in, what form it's contained in, but right down to field level. Our clients have that available to them. We can draw reports that show, in one view, the location of special personal information. So where is what information? We can draw reports where we see potential risks and the controls that we've put in place for the moment, which, as I said, maybe just manual workarounds. We can also do reports for opportunities for automation. So where do we think you should be putting systemic controls into place moving forward? We are able to draw operational artifacts to manage that change, that cultural change into the business. And we create a centralized database of standardized data maps that you can keep and control and version control as you move through this journey. And of course, we can also link that to the policies, documents, and screenshots, so it's all in one place, which is something that we've done for our clients as well. We can move forward, Dolly. I'm just conscious of time. So post-July 2021, what should you be looking at? This is what I think your roadmap should look at. You should be testing and assessing your current information security measures. Is it adequate for the moment? Are there tweaks that need to be made? What could be done better? You need to build sustainability into new ways of work. As I said, it needs to be based on the principles of privacy by design. And how do you keep continually improving on the measures that you have put in place to make it sustainable? I mentioned that you should be assigning or potentially recruiting for new roles, data governance officers, data modelers, possibly change managers, data architects, enterprise architects, etc., etc. Those should all be coming into the mix into your organization if you don't have them already. I've spoken about culture embedment, seeing data as a competitive advantage, and become non-territorial about data in your organization. We've got to get out of that siloed mentality about this is my information, I'm going to hold on to it. Again, it needs to be that enterprise view. You should be looking at understanding that full life cycle of personal data, from collection to disposal. As I said, including storage and warehousing. Definitely should be looking to a paperless environment to eliminate that double risk. We found that so many of our clients have automated, yet still have paper backup in a with a filing organization somewhere. Not only is that a waste of money, but it means that you are having to manage the risk systemically and manage the risk with a third party storer of information as well. I would imagine that you should be focusing now on lesser focused areas, which may have been, for example, that special information. So child information, banking information, union related information, medical information, etc., etc., and managing your data and process models more effectively moving forward. So, things to contemplate as part of that. What is your sustainable data strategy? What are you doing about it? As I've said, data governance in those new roles. How are you aligning business and IT? We found so often in our current organizations that data is seen as an IT function. And how are you making it an enterprise-wide function now, a company-wide function? How are you getting responsibility and accountability for data to rest within business as well? IT is the enabler of this, but the business has to own its data as an enterprise. So how are you getting that? How are you building a full architectural framework, not just a technical architectural framework? And that's something that we're working on with organizations as well. How are you looking at new security and automation tools, and how are you prioritizing their implementation based on the assessment that you would have done about those manual workarounds that perhaps you've put in place? How are you looking at change management, cultural change management, adaptation to systems, adaptation to new ways of work? And have you thought about establishing a data or process modeling center of excellence in your organization to fully harness those data flows? And I think, Darby, I've run out of time, but just very quickly we can flip through these. These are just some of the models that we are using in organizations. Principles of an organizational data strategy. I think the next one is, the business enterprise architect. This is an example of structure and roles in a data governance office. Moving forward, I think it's sorry.
You can take 5 more minutes. No.
Okay. Where is this sitting in your organization? Who is the owner in the organization? Who is the executive sponsor here? And how are you going to build these layers within your organization in order for you to embed the principles of PoPIA, the principles of privacy by design into your organization? Again, I'm saying for competitive advantage moving forward. This is just sort of a sample of an enterprise architectural framework. As I said, many firms that we've been dealing with have looked largely at the technical architecture block right in the right at the bottom there. But how are we moving that throughout the organization? How are we looking at our human capital architecture? If employee data is part of our regulatory compliance strategy. How are we looking at our business architecture, so our process architecture, our service architecture underneath that governance layer, in terms of having a fully secure environment moving forward? And I think, Darby, that's me. I don't think there's another. Oh, sorry. I think the last one is the sample of a data modeling center of excellence. How are you looking at standardizing your data modeling in your organization? What data modeling software are you using? Have you trained people in a standardized manner? Do you have a business knowledge database where you're storing everything? And can you get something out of that? Once you're managing it correctly, can you get, for example, which is something we're able to do through our work, is can you auto-generate, for example, business requirements from that database? Can you auto-generate risk and controls from that database? Can you get work instructions or new role profiles from that database if you need to? Can you extract input to training from that database? All of which is something that we have been doing with our customers certainly over the last months and years on this PoPIA journey. And that's really what I have to say is I hope that you have base compliance in place. I hope you have measures in place. I hope you're thinking about the next phase. And I hope that I've perhaps shared with you some food for thought in that space. And I really wish you well in this next phase. And yeah, I hope you start to see personal information, special personal information and data as something positive, something to interrogate and something to innovate with into the future. Thanks, Davi.
Thank you very much, Jemima. Okay, so it's obviously a huge amount of information to share, and at the end we'll obviously share some contact details if you want to reach out with Jemima with specific questions or you would like them to engage within your organization. We found some very positive feedback from our current customers that Jemima have engaged with, and also some customers that hadn't had things in place where Jemima and her team have engaged with the customers. So obviously quite happy that you reach out. Now I'm gonna take it a little bit further, and I'm just gonna cover some of those topics, right? I mean, we have an hour, and we can most probably talk about these topics for like 5 days on end and not even eat, which would do good for weight loss in my case. But the fact here is that we can only look at a couple of things. So we'll look at some of them, and I want to like focus on specific things. Jemima spoke about compliance of data. She spoke about encryption of documentation. She spoke about paperless office. She spoke about access rights. She spoke about how do I share my content. So there's many topics that we can talk about, right? Retention periods, and I can't even think of all of these. So the retention period is most probably one of the most important ones I had to talk about. And when you consider all of the incredible amount of things that I need to think about and what I have to manage, you think it is impossible, and you think that it is just a matter of time until one of my employees, suppliers, or one of the people that my salespeople are calling or reaching out and saying, where did you get my personal information? Why do you have my personal information? Tell me what you have and what are you going to do about it? And then I'm in trouble, right? So I need to be able to automate as much of this as possible. And I think personally, and most of you would say, of course you think that, you're in document management. I think that the documents are the most critical portion of this, because this is not entered into a database that I can search. It's not in my CRM system or in my ERP system or in my employee management system or payroll system. This is data on documents. I mean, if I'm holding my documents within a folder, within a file cabinet, how is it possible for me to know what's in there? It's impossible. I mean, also more than likely quite difficult for other people to prove that I have it, because they have to find it. But what if they do? The fact of the matter is that it is costing me money. It is making me ineffective. So what I want to emphasize is that I and at DocuWare, we believe that things like PoPIA and GDPR that we've been on a very long journey with should not be perceived as a threat. It should be perceived as a way of additionally forcing me to manage my business in a better and more effective way. So critically important is, what do I do with contracts, invoices, correspondence, HR documents? Those are documents that contain personal information. How do I automatically classify them as contracts, invoices, personal information? And how do I automatically apply retention policies to those documents and ensure that the correct people have access to it? And very importantly, ensure that I've installed them in an encrypted way, so that even if I do have breaches and things like that, I make it for people close to impossible to access my information, right? And I need to be able to at least show that I have done everything that I can to make my information safe, right? And of course, then additional things like Jemima said, like need to be able to report on the fact that people have access to the information. So an audit trail is critically important. So just to recap very quickly before I go into the demo, I want to take a look at retention periods. Right now I'm actually reading, and you know, guys, I hate that. I want to look at retention periods. I want to look at information that I've gathered around my content. I want to look at access rights of authorized users, but also more importantly, what can they do if they access it? What can they do with it? Can I print it? Can they export it? Can they email it? I want to look at auditing of those, so that what modifications has been done on the document, but also a full audit trail about who could access the information. I want encrypted storage, as I mentioned before, and very importantly, I want encryption between endpoints. So where I'm sending it from my email to a specific place, where I'm importing it into my document management system, where I'm simply asking somebody a question around certain content, I want that communication to be encrypted. So let's take a look at a couple of examples so that I can shut up for a change. And you'll see that I am logged into 3 different environments here on my demo system, right? I believe everybody can see my screen. I can see it, so you should. Yeah, I'm logged in as and I wrote the name down here because I constantly forget it, the Data Protection Officer. I think that's the right terminology, Jemima. So here I'm logged in as the
Data Governance Officer.
Data Governance Officer.
Yeah.
Oh, that was close. Data Governance Officer. Okay. So yeah, I'm logged in as the Data Governance Officer. In this example, also my administrator in my environment, so that this person can see much more information. In my another browser, I am logged in as Peter Saunders, and I'm going to look at my watch the whole time, not to go over, as Peter Saunders. And Peter is an employee within this organization, or for this example, let's say he's a sales employee within this example. So one of my critical portions of customer information that he's managing from a personal information perspective. And then finally, I'm also logged in here as a third employee, Simon Stone, and he's actually one of my HR employees, but he also has access to certain content within the environment. Okay. I very briefly just want to take a look at some structure, and of course we don't have time, but I can show the people that's never seen DocuWare before. I know there's a couple of you on the call that's never seen DocuWare before, how it works and things like that, but of course please reach out and we can expand on this presentation. I just want to click on this one view that I have within DocuWare that is only available to the administrator. And the administrator can see classification of documents as a very basic example. Of course, we can expand on that quite significantly. But I can see that contracts, I could have an employment contract, partnership contracts, and this is based on my internal file plan, and I have a specific retention period for that type of document. So I can see how they've been classified. So my entire system is governed by this. So that, for example, if I access the system as Peter Saunders, and I go here to my document trays, I now want to import some documents. Now, DocuWare, of course, has multiple import methods to completely automate document import, and even completely automate the way that I index the documentation. For this example, I'm going to very basically just drag and drop some documents into the system. So I'm going to take those 4 and I'm just going to simply drag them into the DocuWare system. Now, they could have been scanned, they could have come in by email, and I'll show you some capture of email, of course, as well. I could have automatically extracted the text of standard layout documents, or I can, for like variable layout documents like these that I'm bringing in now, simply click on the document to index the document in an according way. I also have the DocuWare intelligent indexing system trying to interrogate these documents to see if it's seen it before. And interesting enough, I have one that it's seen before, which is the certificate of conformity. So I can see a yellow tag on the document suggesting to me the DocuWare has seen it before, but it might need some additional input from me. So I store this document, and immediately when you store, you can see that I've got multiple options on how I can store it. In this example, I want to store the document only for myself to access. I might make some additional decisions about who should have access to the document at a later stage, but I want to be sure. DocuWare has already agreed with me that it's a legal document of document type, and it's got a subcategory of conformity. If I would store in DocuWare outside of these parameters of my file plan, I would get an error telling me that I'm not classifying my document correctly, because classification of the document, as we discussed already, is critically important. And some information was already fetched from me off the page, but I also want to fetch the document date by simply clicking on the document. And I also want the action date, which is also quite important for me, because there's a specific action, and it could also be a specific retention that is applied to this document based on those dates. So that's very important, and could also be a forced index field within the DocuWare system. Now I'm going to click on Store. So this document now obviously stored within the document environment. I can go search for the document. So if I go to my searches and I search now for a legal document, and if I look at all of the subcategories available under legal, there's only certificate of conformity currently available within my system. And I can even see for contact name, there's nothing stored, and I can see for company name, there's some information stored. And I can find exactly what I'm looking for based on that category. Okay. So here's my document. Now, the first thing that I want to focus on is the fact that I've got certain data visible to me in a view. All right, so I could potentially see document numbers, company name, contact emails, and that can also be governed by the internal file plan. Now, importantly, as the data governance officer, or protection officer, as I said before, I can now have access to additional information. If I click on this all fields and I look at all of the documents I have within my system, of course, my demo system, only a couple of documents, I can now see additional data, which could be data that shouldn't be shared with anybody within the organization. I can see that the system has got certain statuses, like a 30-day warning that it's set up. I can see that it's automatically applied a retention date to all documents within the system. So the retention date for this top document was already assigned as the 14th, which has already passed. So certain documents, certain retention periods based on the date, very important. And DocuWare can automatically action on those retention periods, automatically assign, even though the user didn't assign that information. If I go back to Peter, I can now see additional information in my list. So my list is constantly keeping me updated as to what is important and what I need to focus on. I can see that I've got one contract expiring within 30 days. I can see what the date is of the contract, and certain information was hidden from me, but I can see the expiry date, and I can see a potential action date for this contract that I need to focus on. And of course, the system can expand on time-based escalations through emails to ensure that people know what is going on. I can also see that I've got 3 documents that require attention within the next 30 days. I can see the date and the action date and potential expiry date of this document, which is not the retention date, which is simply an expiry date for the task that was assigned to me. And I can also see that there's one document that's actually assigned directly to me. Now, let's say, for example, I want to go back to my searches, this certificate of conformity, and I want to assign this to somebody else to action. I've created a simple way of doing that with an assignment electronic signature applied within the system. That is, of course, completely audited. When I click on the assignment, it asks me certain questions, of course, completely based on requirement and depending on your management of documentation or your file plan internally about how you effectively manage content. So I can put a comment in here, so please review, for example. I can set up when they should follow up. So I'm going to be silly and set it for today. And I can assign people that have read access to the document. So let's say I want to assign it to Simon Stone for read access. And Simon should also be able to edit the document due to the fact that he's going to access it. If I applied more than one person, I can also do things like the action date can be cancelled if anyone actioned it or if everyone actioned it, as an example. And in this case, I will say anyone because there is only one. And I can also decide if I want to notify this person by email that the document has been assigned to them to make sure that they know that they've got access and simply set that to the document. What's quite nice about the electronic signatures is that it is a visible way of seeing that it was assigned. And if I access the history of this document, I can see that it's gone through a reassignment workflow. I can look at all activities that was completed in the workflow from a system perspective. I can see that it went through a retention period workflow where the document was automatically assigned the retention period by the system. And I can also see that it was shared at storage, and I can see certain assignments that was done. We won't go into detail. As my user, I am not allowed to view other history of this document. It is a restriction that was applied by the system, and obviously dependent on how you access, how you set up your file plan, and how you should access data. It is a restriction for me. I can see that as this user, I have full access to this document. And because I have recently assigned it to Simon Stone, if Simon now goes search for the same document, a legal document, and it's a certificate of conformity, there is my document. And I can see that Simon now has exactly the same rights. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of other examples. I'm going to capture another document. Let's say this letter that's coming from this company, Leisure Park Moser. This time I'm going to capture it for everybody's access. Now, in this case, I have extracted no automated information, which was, of course, possible, as you saw within the previous example. And let's say that I want to index this document, and it is, in this case, a letter. So I hit the drop-down box. It gives me all of the options that I have. It's a letter. My subcategory, in this case, is a letter received from my client. My company name is on the document. I've received the document from this gentleman, Fanny Moser, and I've got a subject on the document, maybe a project name, which I don't have in this case, and a date on the document. I don't want to action this document. I just want to store it for record keeping within the system. My file plan, however, says this document's retention period is 7 years. So I store this document into the system. So we've already seen that DocuWare is going to automatically apply a retention period to this document and give access to people that's supposed to have access. So if I go to Simon, and I research the search for all of the documents within the access system that I have access to, I can see that I immediately have access to 3 documents that is either assigned to me or assigned to everybody, including this letter from my client. Going back to Peter, however, going to his search environment, also resetting the search and searching for all documents, I can see that Peter immediately has access to more information because it was either stored by him or it is accessible by him because some other people stored it within the environment. I've built like a simple PoPIA workflow associated to a document that is shared with everybody. Concerning for me that you have shared it with everybody. So as the data governance officer, nearly said protection again, I have immediately received the task in DocuWare, and my task activity is review personal identifiable information access rights. Because this document contains personal information, because there's personal information on this page, it is sent a task to the data governance officer telling him to review the access. Very simple workflow. I can either delete the document with a reason, I can accept the document based on the changes, or I can review the access and give different people access to the document. I can also go so far as to forward it to other individuals. So I can, for example, assign it now, please review access rights for more information, or audit it, of course. Because it's critical, I want you to follow up today. I want to give certain people read access. So let's give, because I'm now changing access to this document, Peter King access to the document, who's my manager. And I also want to give Peter Sanders edit access on the document to process the task. It must be completed by everyone. So let's say that Peter King must also complete the task because he is the manager. And I want to notify them by email that they've received this task before I even process it. So Simon will both get an email, but in the interest of time, we'll stay within the DocuWare system. And I can see that documents that require within 30 days, it has not popped up yet. So my workflow is still busy with it. So we'll get back to that in just a moment in the interest of time, and we'll capture another document. Let's capture one more document. So we've seen that task. So now I want to capture this document. It is a calculation spreadsheet. It's actually an Excel document I can see, so a fully editable document. So it's important with who I share it with. Now I want to share this document, and it needs to be available for some, right? So let's access it via document type. And I see, but I have got no document types here that actually make sense, because my file plan has not considered this document type. So another example of a potential PoPIA or GDPR workflow is that I can set up a DocuWare form to request a change within this document type. So for this example, I can make a change to a current document type, so review my current document types within my environment, or I want to request a new document type change request. Very basic example. It should be a sales calculation, and I don't really know what the subtype is. And I can put it in a comment here. I'll just write the word test and hit confirm. Once again, automatic task generated for the data governance office or the data governance officer to generate this task. So once again, going to my tasks, seems like I'm a little bit quicker than the workflow engine today. Oh, I'm in the wrong user, that's why. I'm not quicker than the workflow engine. So there is my task assigned to my governance officer, and my governance officer can now simply look at the task, take a look at the information that was sent through, either accept the change or decline the change. The data governance officer can also have direct access to the file plan by reviewing it or adding new changes. So for example, according to a meeting that was had about the new document type that should be put in, or according to reviewing the file plan, I decided to create a document type sales and a subcategory calculation or calculation sheet. So I just create a subcategory calculation, and I set a retention period of 7 years to this document type, or depending on internal process discussions. And I can simply approve this task and automatically notify Peter that his document type has been created. So going back into the environment as Peter, I now want to store this document again. I want to store it for some. My document type is a sales document type, now currently available. The subtype is a calculation. and I can index my document accordingly, allowing me, of course, to now share it with specific people internally and externally. To review quickly, I can index documents automatically or manually based on the type of document. Documents are automatically in DocuWare is encrypted with 256-bit AES encryption according to Microsoft Azure standards, which makes it, in essence, a GDPR-compliant storage facility. I can automatically index the data of a standard form or variably of a variable form with either intelligent indexing or click indexing. I can automatically apply retention periods to my document, and I can automatically kick off workflows based on personal identifiable information that is critically important internally. Of course, even more important is the fact that if let's look at this example of Peter searching for all of the documents within employee files, Peter can literally see Peggy Jenkins' appraisal because he, in my example in sales and now suddenly finance, can review that information and some information about himself. But when I'm logged into the system and searching employee files as Simon Stone as the head of HR, can review even payslips or additional information within HR, automatically ensuring that access rights is correctly assigned within the DocuWare system. I can also set up forms for requests on changes, and I can also set up workflows for requests for destruction of personal information. And that is where it becomes critically important, where I can even search for full text information on documents via the full text search to find my email address, my full name, my ID number on any document within the DocuWare system, irrelevant of the format of the document, who it is currently assigned to, of course, if I present the search as the data protection officer that has got access to all information. Guys, thank you very much. We are slightly over on time. Some very basic examples that I've shown from a DocuWare perspective on how documents can be effectively managed. But I think more importantly, how I can force my file plan onto users so that we ensure that our structures and our procedures internally and our privacy by design, more importantly, is followed internally. And so that we can effectively report on what happened to a document since the time that we've received it until the time that we've destroyed it, and also importantly, in an automated way. I have not received any questions, so I hope there are some, and we are going to remain on the call now to field some questions. While you get to that, I just want to share the presentation again, and on the screen, I have shared some information how you can reach out to myself and Jemima should you have any additional questions regarding this topic. You can, of course, reach me by my email address, david.malan@docuware.com, and you can also access my calendar tool directly by going to go.docuware.com/David Malan, and you are welcome to book some time in my calendar to have a discussion related to these topics. I've also placed Jemima's email address, jemima@businessgenetics.com, should you want to reach out to her to ask specific questions around the webinar or potentially set up some time with her to discuss business process optimization in general or specific PoPIA requirements that you might have that you feel you have a specific risk for within your organization. If there are no questions, I am now saying thank you very much for those that have joined, and thank you for your time. It's always difficult to cover specific topics that people have, but please reach out with some questions. I'll remain on the call.